Welcome back to Raynor Ridge and to another episode in our template design series, and this is the one that many people have been waiting for, with our, by a mile, the most polarising template, and we're looking at the second here, which is our Biarritz screen. Biarritz is defined by that huge swale in the middle, which can often be pinned. It's not always geometric, it's not always straight across, we can look at different spins on it, but it's certainly iconic, certainly very polarising, 100% unnatural and man-made. We're going to look at what this does, why it's there, why you would build a green like this, and kind of where it's come from. Enjoy! So, what is this whole design? What's the shot value we're testing, and why is there this giant swale in the green that will annoy so many people? You've got to first understand what this hole is designed to test. Designed to test distance control with a long iron and also some creativity in how you visualize rollout. And from that point of view, I really like the concept. I find it very hard to look at personally, although I'm appreciating them more and more. I just think we've seen far too many of them that are poor renditions, to be honest, and people just sticking a swale in the middle because they're bored or can't think of anything else. But when it's done really, really well, it's an outstanding hole. And this one, I think, for my money, is the best rendition of a traditional Biarritz. Typically, the green will be very, very large because you are looking at front pins that run traditionally towards the swale, however gently. So with these ones, you're thinking about, can you land it on visualize rollout and stop it rolling into the swale, so you've got that hazard in the middle of the green. On the back, you're thinking about wherever that pin is, can you clear the swale, or do you want to, if it's just over, can you roll through it? And that's typically the case for really long Biarritzes. Sometimes you will see this front part be fairway. It might sometimes be cambered so that the ball can roll down and through. But generally you want to be thinking of how is this swale coming into play in a way that is interesting. The geometric nature of this is not necessarily a must, although it fits the hole pretty well for this one. So have a little think about how you might play it for different pin positions. It's definitely going to ask a question of distance control, slightly similar to how we look at it for the Eden, but doing it in a different way, and typically test it. This would be the longest par 3 that you have. So with this one, I think with the wind, we should be able to just clear it and go straight at it pretty much with a 4-iron. A little bit of a fast, which we went after, but it should be safely aboard. So that's our Biarritz and how it works. There's definitely a couple of spins, which we're going to look at shortly. So the next hole that we're going to look at is the fourth at Fairyland, which is the Biarritz here. And as you can tell, it's immediately very different. Firstly, the land movement, but you'll also notice that the fairway is what's short of the green rather than it also being green slopes. What that means is the ball's going to release out a little less quickly, and there's obviously going to be no pins short of the swale. However, for the pin that you've got here, you're going to have to be running it short. You have to go through that swale and have no other option. Now, the swale itself is around 20 feet down from, if you're looking at where the tee is, which means you're going to have to land it somewhere up here, try to visualize rollout, and it also flows from left to right as the player looks at it from the tee, which means we're going to have to think really carefully about where exactly we're going to land it in order to get it close. The green itself has a lot of interesting contours, and there's going to be some pins towards the back where it's just flying a long shot, but it's really these ones near the front where I think you've got the most interest, and it's certainly one of the most engaging Biarritzes that I've seen, which gives you a variety of options as to how to get the ball close, but really makes you think more than anything else about where the ball is landing and how it's reacting when it does land, which is really what the hole is all about. We're looking at is actually not on a Joji course. This is by T Petro, and it's Potunk with the 17th here. And straight away you can see that you've got that big swale in the middle. It's got a lovely setting right down by the water, and you've got the distance that you would expect. 247 means that you're hitting a long club in, and it's really working on that distance control as discussed earlier. Now, as with the one on Fairyland, this one features fairway in front of the green, and you can see clearly the green itself actually on this one compared to some of Joe's ones, it's not that long. It's 29 yards, which is around about average. 30 yards is a pretty standard length for a green. And for the front two pins, you are definitely therefore going to have to be landing it short. and rolling it through as you would kind of intend. If you come up slightly shy, you can see there's a bit of a false front on the green, so if you don't get it quite enough there, you're rolling back into here and you've got a tricky little chip shot out. Where this one I think gets even more interesting is this little mound just in the centre. As you've seen with some of Joe's, there's different internal contouring you can use on the Biarritz green. Other than that swale, the rest of how the green plays is kind of up to you. So here he's got this back slope that can feed the ball towards these pins, so if you're going for a back pin you can probably just hit it a little bit more boldly towards the left hand side and the ball's coming back around. Whereas for the front pins, if you're hitting central, aiming at the pin but going slightly left, it's going to feed back. Aiming at this pin slightly right, it's going to feed back. So it's got a tiny hint of a mini punch bowl around each one, but with more of a mound. Where this gets more interesting though is if you go a little bit long, we'll now look at that slope and how it impacts us. Suddenly we're facing a far trickier putt down and over this, trying to stop it before we putt off the green. And I think those sorts of internal contours are brilliant because they add interest, and it's a different challenge depending on whether you're short or you're long, and it can either hurt or help you. But again, it's a really good example of the Biarritz. It has exactly the same function as you would expect. It's testing a player's long iron distance control in particular, but there's a little bit about how whether you're further left or further right, and that little mound in the middle adds a little bit more to it. So how do you go put a spin? So what kind of spins or twists can you put on a Biarritz? Well, the obvious first stage is always, could you change the par? Here we're looking at the 17th at Springbrook Country Club, again by Joe, and this one we're looking at is a par 5 Biarritz. It's a really interesting hole design. We'll come back to the tee shot in a second, but you see these giant bunkers fronting the green, giving it a little bit of an Alps sort of feel to it as well, in that the flag might be a little bit blind depending on where you're coming from. And you've got that typical Biarritz swale, but because it's not a par 3 and because there's angles and things coming into play, you've got a lot more interest going on here. If you're a little bit left, you've got this massive runoff that you don't want to contend with. You've got bunkers on the right that are sort of semi-hidden. You've got these bunkers in front that also, what he's doing is, depending on wind and direction, those could come into play because you might be landing it just over if you're downwind to run it all the way onto the front. And as you can see, pin 1 is tucked right on the front, which is going to make us really think about how we want to deal with the swale in front and the false front just on the side of the green. So there's a lot going on here, and additionally there's a little mini spine coming through the middle, which again bisects the green a bit more as well. So if you do meet that runoff down here, or you're flopping either very accurately just up to here, or you're running down, and vice versa. If the pin is over here, you're trying just to clear that and then not to go through and into the bunker. So there's a lot more going on here than your traditional Biarritz, and it's a really interesting hole as a result. So we're going to take it back to the tee shot and have a little look at this. Now, with what the Joe has done really interestingly here is there's a little bit of a narrows if you take on driver, and your reward for that, it's not a long par 5. So if you're hitting the longest driver, you're probably running just to about here, maybe threatening this bunker if you're a bit too far right, but you're probably not going to need to contend with the swale as much. You can push the ball really pretty close to it, and so you gain a bit more of a margin for error. But you can also lay up just back here with 3 wood. So, and if you do that for a front pin, well, we've probably got 3 wood just about carrying these bunkers and just rolling on. So let's give that a little go and see how we get on. So gentle red fast, but shouldn't hopefully run out of fairway. And so 286 or so, you can see we've got 268, and here we're hitting, you're in that wonderful dilemma of you can lay up, but that I think is going to go a little bit too far. That is then threatening these bunkers just perfectly, and I think we might have to downloft a 3 wood just a touch and see how we get on. But it's asking a really interesting question on that approach shot. So there we go, hopefully that's going to be round about what we need. So just clearing those bunkers, running down towards the swale. Does it have enough to just get through? Just about. Unfortunately we're a little bit too far towards that right hand side, but you can see how this would function and how it makes you really consider where exactly you're landing in approaching this green. Where I think it gets even more interesting, let's say you lay up, well, are you laying up to an area where you can't see the base of the pin, you're taking out that swale, Are you laying up somewhere down here and just bombing it down here and then hoping for that shot? Whatever you do, that second or third shot, the approach is always going to be interesting to this green, and it's just a really fun, nuanced hole. So the next spin of this template that we're going to look at is the third at St Cyrus, which won the CC contest a couple of years ago and features a few interesting takes on different templates. Now, it's obviously, first of all, it's a par 4, but it still plays true to that core kind of reason of this template, which is long shot approaching the green, can you control distance? And what Dan did really interestingly with this was turn it into a drivable par 4, where it's asking you the question of do you want to go for it, and if you are, controlling your distance is really paramount, because 2 putts aren't necessarily going to be easy if you're on the wrong level. So first of all, we're looking at where you might land. Well, if you've got a 295 driver, you're landing around about here. Other drivers might be landing slightly shorter. Others, you can probably thread the needle, but if you're not at least carrying it 280, I'm probably not going for this green unless it's downwind. So first of all, the longer driver you have, the more you can bite off the corner of this bunker and take it away from running into this one. Although I don't think this bunker is a bad miss necessarily, apart from probably for this pin. So let's say we are going for it. Which pins are best to? You probably don't want to go for it for this pin. Even though it seems like it's on the front, you've got the swale behind it, and you're going to face a nasty putt back up and try to stop it just over the top of this tier, which is tricky. And you're going to have to be landing it so close to this bunker, probably in this little upslope, just to get it to stop on that front tier. It's probably doable, but it's also probably not the best play for it. For the middle one, yeah, definitely going for that, because you've got a big backstop behind it, and you've got this one, so you could land it short, you could land it behind. The fun part about pins in the swale is that you've got a little bit of leniency from both sides. You can roll it on, or if you don't go too far, you can use this as a backstop. And then these final 2 pins are going to be wind dependent. If I'm downwind, I might be chancing them, but let's look at the danger over the back. If you're coming in too hot at this, you could potentially be running through and facing a really nasty shot back from heavy rough. The beach, probably not the water, I doubt you're reaching that, although I know I've definitely made it to here at one point when I was playing the rounds and had to try to flop over the bridge. So there's a lot of interest there just on that one shot by where he's placed a couple of bunkers, particularly thinking about this one and this one and this one kind of just eating into the corner of the screen, and also those 2 slopes working in tandem. Where this gets more interesting is, well, if you're not going for it, where are you laying up? For this pin, notice this tiny little slope here. You don't want to be coming at it from over here, which is where, and this is a big feature of St Cyrus, off the tee, all of the space is here, but you don't really want to be there, because although there's loads of space there, look at the angle you give yourself into that pin. You're having to stop a pitching wedge really, really short, or you're playing to the fat of the green. And you can play it really strategically and safely. You could be playing, I don't know, 6 iron off or 7 iron off the tee, and then a pitching wedge landing to about here, and you've got a decent look at going this way, but you're really having to think about it. Whereas if you do go to here, what you kind of ensure that you're not able to do is really take on this flag, because look at that tiny little landing zone you've got. You can't go straight at it. If you're going slightly further and you're smashing driver all the way down here, let's say, well, probably not driver, let's say you're smashing 3-wood, maybe 3-wood, down here, or you short your side yourself even further, and you're running towards that. But it might be good for one of these pins. You might choose to do that for this back pin, because you can take out the swale a little bit and play a lob wedge over and just leave it somewhere around about here. Or you can take 3-wood and try to thread the gap here, and actually that leaves you a relatively straightforward little splash shot just to this pin or to this one. There's so many ways in which you could play this hole, and I'm certain there's others that I haven't yet found. I've definitely tried before to hit driver down to this zone here, because I felt that looked like a safe bet for a flag here, or on the back ones, and got way too much of it, and that's how I ended up down here. There's just different hazards because it's all so well thought out, but there's also that element of randomness. As you can see from the measure tools, there's an awful lot going on, but you could play this hole on 4 different days for 4 different pins and play it completely differently. So that's the Biarritz. It's comfortably the most polarising template that is out there, precisely because it tends to look quite unnatural, and it forces a different sort of shot mindset than you maybe have elsewhere. There are really interesting natural examples in real life, such as the 16th at North Berwick, but it's tended to be used more on these geometric courses. Now, I do think it's a template that has a wide variety of uses, and you've seen with some of these spins, I think it produces some of the most creative holes that we have. It's a hole design I intend to use a little bit more in my own courses, so maybe you'll see one from me again a bit soon. I hope you've enjoyed, and as ever, see you soon.